Mets fans, our next guest is a play-by-play commentator on Hockey Night in Canada. He was a longtime voice of the CFL on CBC and also on TSN. He is in the media wing of Brampton, Ontario, and we like to welcome Chris Cuthbert, CC, to the Too Much Podcast. C, how's it going?
Joshua, good to be with you. Mike Futa speaks very highly of you, and I speak very highly of Mike Futa. So this should be good.
Yeah, let's talk about him as we get going here off the top because without him, this interview doesn't get going. And I'm excited to have you on. I've listened to you for several years in my living room, and watching you on the tube. But the connection you have with Mike Futa, we have with Mike Futa is amazing, and also ties into just this a couple days ago was Amazing Grace's 19th birthday, and we obviously miss and love her a lot, and what she did and continues to do to help others that are fighting a battle. Kind of that's what ties this interview together. Can you kind of shed some light on, Mike, and obviously the story of Amazing Grace too?
Well, I go back with Mike to junior hockey. He was involved in Owen Sound. I was involved with the Guelph Storm for a period of time. But I think where our real connection is Mike seemed to think when the Kings went on their run to the Stanley Cups that I happened to be a luck charm. I did a lot of the games, and it seemed every time I came in to do a game for the Kings, then they won. I never reminded Mike that they usually won anyway, whether I was there or not. But because of my connection with the Guelph Storm and Drew Doughty, I think he thought, there was some extra karma going on. So that was that. He's a good man. He's a good hockey man. He's one of the best people you'll meet in hockey.
Yeah, he definitely is. He definitely is for sure. And that story of him and obviously Justin Williams being tied to Amazing Grace, it's a heartwarming story, isn't it, CC?
It is. It is. It's and you know what? Throughout the game, you find people that make connections and really rise to support great causes, and that's what Mike has done. And that was the premise of coming on. I would have come on anyway, but for a great cause, it's even more special.
Yeah, it definitely helps it out, and we thank our sponsors and our team here at the podcast to help with that and help continue with raising funds for those that need. And also back here, we're here in Alberta, and Ben Stelter was a very heartwarming story for us here in Alberta, but it captivated the hockey community, and that's another one that we kind of work with. And Ron McLean, who's a good friend of yours with the Child Advocacy Center in Red Deer too. There's so many great causes, but this game has so many great people, Chris, and I can't thank the community enough for getting behind and doing these interviews to help us shed some light on that. And let's kind of talk about your career here. Obviously started in 1984 in Montreal, from what I understand, and how it's quite a long ago, obviously, but the great career you've had and continue to have. And obviously you being in everyone's living room. But did you ever vision where you were when you started? Was this a goal of yours to get to where you are, obviously, in being a play-by-play commentator, or did you get it? How did that all kind of start for you? And then who gave you your first break, I guess, along the early?
Oh man, I've had so many breaks that, and it goes back a little bit before '84 in Montreal. Actually, I started at CJAD in Montreal. It was my first major market stop, but I was dipping my toe in the water before that. I went to Queen's University, and I was lucky enough that they had a radio station at Queen's that not only did some sports coverage, but they actually did live coverage of hockey and football. And the year I got involved, the football team won the Vanier Cup. The hockey team was coached by Freddie O'Donnell, who was on a Bruins team. He was one of the young guys on the Bruins team. He wasn't there for the Cups, but he was there just before they got going. And Freddie always treated me like I was one of the guys on the team. So the involvement with university got me going. It got me my first job because I had that tape with play-by-play experience. It got me a job in Yorkton, Saskatchewan. the voice of an SJHL team, the Yorkton Terriers, and I tell the story often, but it kind of sums up where I was going and where this guy was going. A 15-year-old came up on our first road trip with Yorkton, and he sat beside me and he introduced himself. He said, "I'm Ken Danico, and I'm going to play in the NHL one day." And I thought, boy, we're sharing the same dream, sort of. I'm not going to play, but and to have Ken Danico and the Banners in Newark and the Stanley Cup championships, really proud to have watched that from the very beginning. And so, even as a kid, I went to bed with the radio on every night, listening to hockey, listening to Dan Kelly on KMOX, or even Bob Cole on CBC Radio, or Foster Hewitt. So, I would lay in bed at night thinking, man, that would be the ultimate job. But I actually didn't dare to dream that big. I guess I dreamed it, but I didn't believe it was possible. And only when I got to Queens did I start making connections that, you've been given this opportunity, this vehicle, maybe you should run with it. So, but breaks, you ask about breaks. So one of the biggest breaks I got, I did get the job in Montreal on the recommendation of Kurt Kilback. And Kurt and I had never met at the time, but Kurt had also worked in small market Yorkton, Saskatchewan. And I guess he was driving through one day and heard me and thought, oh, okay, that guy might have some potential. And a friend of his was my future boss in Montreal. And so when Bob Dunn, who was the sports director in Montreal, happened to be back home in Winnipeg and was a friend of Kurt's, and said, do you know anybody that might work cheaply in radio in Montreal? And Kurt says, well, I don't know him, but I heard there was this kid from down east, or from the east, that had left Yorkton and gone back east, because I had left to go to Kingston. And he said he might be interested in the job. So long story longer, that kind of was the first of many huge breaks for me.
Yeah, that's and it obviously nice when people believe in you too. And I can tie that back to Mike Futa, who's helped me out tremendously through this 5-year journey of this podcast, and the relationship I've built with him, and the relationships you gain across this great country, and this great story that happens. We'll go to the CFL here, obviously inducted into the Hall of Fame, the media wing side there, and how special was that moment, and calling the CFL games. And I guess I have to ask, like, do you miss it a lot? Obviously going right to the full NHL coverage. Obviously Rod Smith and Dustin Nilsson doing a great job, and many others. But
absolutely,
yeah. How precious are those days that you had in the CFL?
Well, extremely. I still miss it. I was walking into the Bell Center last week, and a couple of fans who were in to watch the game from the Hamilton area came up to me, and we were chatting a bit, and they said, they asked me the same question, and I do miss it a lot. It was one of those dreams that we were talking about. I grew up a huge CFL fan. Russ Jackson was one of my heroes, and that goes way back before most of the people watching this. But not that I want to date Russ, but I will date myself. It was special I thought the league was as special for me as growing up watching the Leafs as well. So Russ Jackson was a hero of mine. Red Kelly and Daryl Sittler were heroes of mine. Bob Gibson of the St. Louis Cardinals was another. But I wanted to be involved in the CFL. And I mentioned at Queens I had a chance to talk or to do football play-by-play. So it was a life lesson, though, because I did join CBC in '84, and I never got to call a game until '91. I was the voice of the Alouettes and the Concords radio in Montreal, and I thought I was ready for this opportunity. And 7 years later, I finally got the opportunity. Don Whitman was at a World Track and Field Championships in Japan, so I got my first chance, and it was a Labor Day game, 1991. So the Argos were on their way to the Grey Cup with pinball Clemens and Rocket Ishmael and some of the great names in football. The Ticats were the host team. They had just fired their coach. They hadn't won a game that year. And so my first game looked like it was going to be a rout. It was going to be all Argos, but the CFL, being the CFL, especially on Labor Day, expect the unexpected. And the Ticats won that game. It was a thriller. Lots of big plays, a chance to showcase that maybe I had a chance to contribute on the CFL on CBC, and again, Hamilton won the game. It was a great game. And after that, they kind of said, you know what, we're going to try and work you in. So just a little sidebar story about that. And it kind of sums up what the CFL is all about. Lee Knight was a Canadian running back for the Ticats. And I mentioned some of those huge names for the Argos. The Stars were out. But Lee Knight scored 2 touchdowns in that game and made some big plays. And about 20 years later, I'm on the field, and I'm not sure, I can't remember if it was Ivor Wynn or Tim Hortons field. And Lee Knight's daughter came up to me and she introduced herself. And I said, man, I said, my first football game, your dad was a star. And she rolled her eyes and she said, yeah, we hear about it all the time. But, it's great that when an unsung guy gets to grab the stage and the spotlight, and so often that happens in the CFL, and it's great.
Yeah, it's such a great game. And I got to ask you, where do you see the game right now? It feels like they had a really great season this past year, and there's going to be some momentum going into this next season. Obviously, we lost the season because of COVID, but it seems like the league is at a very healthy place now. Where are your thoughts with that?
Yeah, it's been a slow build back. It
Yes.
really got hit maybe more than any other of the main sports by COVID, and I did have some concerns, but I don't anymore. Again, there's some great people right across the league, and the hardest thing for me in the CFL is choosing a team to cheer for. I was an Ottawa Rough Rider fan because I grew up in Toronto, and the blackouts kept me from seeing the Argos and the Ticats. So I'd watch Ottawa, Russ Jackson and Ronnie Stewart and Whit Tucker, these great Canadian players, and great American players like Vic Washington and Margene Atkins, who ended up going to the NFL. Bo Scott went to the NFL after Jim Brown retired and played for the Cleveland Browns. So I became an NFL fan through the guys that left the CFL to play there, but the CFL was always top of mind for me, and so it's great to see them back. And a long-winded answer, but the Grey Cup again just was so incredible, and Rod Smith was great, and there was another surprise team, the Alouettes, on a last play. It's what the Grey Cup and the CFL is all about, and it was special, and I left it in good hands, certainly, because Rod's outstanding, and Dustin's been lighting it up, and Marshall Ferguson, they've got some young energy going now on the broadcast, and it's great.
Yeah, it definitely is. It definitely is, for sure. It's a good pastime, and it's continue to grow. And you got the great voices there that you said are doing a great job on the evil telecom, as Elliot Friedman likes to say, TSN. But let's move over to the mentorship side here. I'm big on hearing what other people are, their journey on who mentored them and who helped them. We kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but and you brought up Don Whitman's name. But how many great mentors did you have? Obviously the Bob Coles, and there's so many greats that were before you. Jim Houston too. And many others, Doc Emmerich over in the US. There's so many great people that were along the way, but was there someone that kind of stands out to you that was a mentor to you along the way that maybe I didn't even name? Maybe there's someone that I don't know that I didn't bring up.
Right. Well, there's a million names. And, when you join Hockey Night in Canada in 1984 and you're on the same team as Dave Hodge and Dick Irvin and Mickey Redmond and Bob Cole and Harry Neal. And I think Ron started about the same time as me. In fact, I met Ron McLean a day or two before my first ever hockey night game, because he was doing his first Calgary Flames regional broadcast on the Thursday before my first Saturday. But the name I'll give you, and I grew up listening to Dave, and I was in awe of Dave, and I think for a long time I did a poor imitation of Dave. Instead of being myself, I was trying to do it the way Dave Hodge would do it. And I even hear that in some of my early 80s broadcasts. And I'm thinking, man, I was almost trying to mimic his style. But I'll give you another name because I got to work closely for a long time with Dick Irvin. And when I was first hired by Hockey Night in Canada, Ralph Mellenby said, we want you to host for a while. We want you to go and watch Dick, and that will kind of be your template of how to do it. And it was the best, and it was the worst thing you could do for a young guy, I think. And the reason what was the best is because nobody does it better. And Dick is such a gentleman. He is such a class act, and he is such an amazing broadcaster. And I say worst because it was intimidating. You go into the studio and watch Dick, and he doesn't have any notes. And they say, Dick, we need 45 seconds to fill. And he'll look into the camera and he'll do 44.5 seconds and then throw it right on cue. And you're thinking, man, I'll never be able to do that. So it was daunting. But and then I got to share the broadcast booth with him. And the first time I sat in that spot at the Forum in hallowed territory, and he turns to me and says, you know who usually sat in that seat? And of course it's Danny Gallivan, and you're already in awe, you're already nervous, but he's just reminding you that you have to live up to a certain standard, and that is almost an impossible standard in sitting in the same chair as Danny Gallivan. But I think he was trying to say, respect where you are and give it everything you've got. And I think I always felt that every time I walked into the Forum, not just because of Danny, just because of the environment. And I didn't grow up as a Montreal Canadiens fan, but it in very short order, you felt that every time you walked into the rink, that you were in hallowed territory, and you wanted to do your best. And so yeah, Dick was a very special mentor. In fact, I still trade emails with him, and the most recent was just a week ago when he reminded me, as the playoffs were about to begin, that Rocket Richard might not be the top guy in terms of goals, but he was close to the top in terms of goals per game of the playoffs. And I looked it up, and he was right. After Bossy and Lemieux, Rockets number 3. So love the man and love the influence he had on me, and what the legacy he left the show.
Yeah, it's definitely great. And now you're paving the way, and a lot of young people are looking up to you. Is there any advice you would give, a young broadcaster in the industry kind of coming up, anything that you would pass on to them that are listening to this that might be helpful for them in their journey as they try to follow you and the other greats that have, got to be on the tube, on the pipes there?
Well, it is possible. You need a lot of luck.
Yeah.
And I would say a couple of things: be authentic, be yourself. I mentioned the Dave Hodge story, and it certainly doesn't hurt to aspire to be somebody like Dave Hodge, but you have to do it your way. And you know what I've also learned as an old guy, I've learned, embrace all of the moments. I now have a greater appreciation for being the voice of the Yorkton Terriers and what that was like on the early part of the journey more now, and how special that was maybe than at the time. And also being able to work with, I look back fondly at working with so many great people, and I sometimes dial back and think, oh, it'd be nice to work again with him or him. And you know what? Just embrace the moment when it's there, because it's kind of like a river; it flows on.
Yeah.
And appreciate the times you had, and now live in the moment you're in. And I certainly am embracing even the moment I'm in now. I've fulfilled the dream of calling some Stanley Cups, and would like to call a Stanley Cup final that is won by a Canadian team. That may or may not happen. But even just this season, when you think about what we've witnessed this year, Connor McDavid knocking on the door of 100 assists, and Austin Matthews closing in on 70 goals, and there's still two other guys that may end up higher than them in the Hart Trophy voting, because Nikita Kucherov and Nathan McKinnon have had such brilliant seasons. It's we've had quite a ride this year, and
We
can't
have,
wait for the playoffs. So yeah.
Well, and we'll get to that for sure, because Paul Bissonnette was on with us with Mike Futa earlier in the year, and we talked about the momentum going into this year, and it's lived up to the hype in every which way, obviously. And you've touched on a lot of great players that have having great years, but one of the things I wanted to get to is obviously you did get to call a Stanley Cup final. I know that was a big thing for you and the Tampa Bay Lightning over the Montreal Canadiens, and it was a very special moment. And I have to imagine how great that was for you, and and all the great games you got to cover, and we'll get to the Olympic coverage too. But when you got that call, and it's been a few now since you've had it, how meaningful and grateful was that, and obviously getting to do it with a great person in Craig Simpson too.
Yeah, it's really special. I think back, it's funny that night, and I think Montreal had such a great run. They surprised a lot of people winning the first round against Toronto. I was surprised that they swept Winnipeg. I think not everybody was expecting they'd beat Vegas. But when it got to the point of 3-1 in the Stanley Cup final, I think we knew when we were in Tampa that night was going to be the final night. And I happened to meet Barb Underhill, who I've worked with in figure skating for years, and she was the skating coach for the Lightning, and she was coming in for the celebration and being part of it. And I thought, man, the connections you make on the way are sometimes you don't even realize that where you're going to end up again with somebody like Barb, and watching her win a Stanley Cup in her role with the Lightning. But yeah, it's special because for a lot of years I got to do the conference finals, and they were special too. But there was always something kind of lacking. You talk about 93 and the last time a Canadian team won, and I was 93, and I was along for that amazing ride for the Canadians. And I think they went into overtime 10 times, or won 10 overtime games. I'm not sure if I called 6 or 7 of those, but that journey, I mean, to think back and that the Canadians were down 2-0 to Quebec in the series, and I believe it was 2-0. They were down in game 3 and came back to win that in overtime. And suddenly everything started to fall into place on the way to a Stanley Cup championship. And I only bring that up because you get to the conference final and then you're done. And that there's so much more of that story left to tell. So yeah, that's something after 40 years that I did want that opportunity before it was over. And that's why I loved covering the CFL, because since 96, you got to call the Grey Cup, and there was always closure to the season, and there was always that historic stuff that was left behind, the legacy of championship teams, and the legacy. And Saskatchewan fans hate when I bring it up, but they, the too many men call, and those moments that are left in sporting lore that you never forget. So I got to call every city in this Canadian Football League winning a Grey Cup, which was special. The last one I called was Winnipeg, and that was the first time I'd got to call a Blue Bomber Grey Cup. But that was special, and I'm surely not going to be around long enough to call every Canadian team winning a Stanley Cup, but I have had great moments with every one of the franchises, and that's special. And just give me one Canadian team winning a cup.
Yeah, and that will be a very beautiful day when it hopefully it happens. And we got a great there's 4 great teams going to the dance here, and hopefully one of them gets over to that. But we'll move over just the Olympic coverage real quick. Another great, obviously great moment. And I'm a big fan of TSN Overdrive, and I know that some of those guys are your dear friends too, and they've been on this podcast. And one of the things I love is Jeff O'Neill always kind of talks about, like, how does a play-by-play guy, like, how does he go into that day, like that game, obviously the golden goal called by Sidney, like that you called by Crosby scoring it, is how much preparation goes into that, a moment like that, or is that just all natural and it's just the moment just gives the moment? Or is there obviously you have to prepare a lot, I would assume, but in that moment, how special was that, obviously in Canada, in Vancouver, and a great play by Iggy to get it to him? How special was that for you too?
Well, for me, I just wanted to get the call right. And to be honest, the golden goal had not been on my mind until the intermission of before overtime. And because it was such a big game and kind of a career highlight for me, and it was an afternoon game, I didn't sleep the night before. So I was kind of fired up and on adrenaline for a lot of it. And then you get to the final minute and you think it's going to end, and Zach Parise scores, and now the game's tied, and you're going to overtime. And I kind of felt like I was losing a little bit of concentration in the overtime period. So somebody asked me to go on a radio interview, and Ray Ferraro was not doing the game, but sitting beside me. And I agreed to go on this radio interview, and he looked at me like, "What are you doing?" And I thought, I got to keep engaged. I got to keep my train of thought, and I wanted to just stay alert. And when that was done, I kind of exhaled, and I thought, okay, we're going to overtime. If this was soccer, the next goal would be the golden goal. And I kind of had that little eureka moment. I thought, okay, that's good. That's what we're going to use. So yeah, you prep forever. And then I honestly didn't prep for overtime. I wasn't even sure of the rules, which might sound unprofessional, and maybe it is, but Ron Wilson was the coach of Team USA, and he told me he wasn't sure about the overtime rules either. You're so in the moment of anyway.
Of a 60-minute hockey game, right?
Yeah, we hadn't gone. We I guess there was a shootout. There had been a shootout. Canada was in a shootout with Switzerland earlier, but anyway, it was not what I was thinking of at the time. So I'm glad the golden goal came out, and I was a little surprised at how much it took hold, and people kind of thought I invented the term, and I was kind of sheepish about that, because I'm thinking, no, the golden goal is a common sports phrase, but it just happened to be the perfect time to use it. So yeah. It's the highlight of my career. I hope I have one to match. I'll just give you a brief story. The day before, you mentioned Doc Emmerich. The day before, we were together doing the bronze medal game, and we were kind of just chit-chatting, and Al Michaels came over. And I remember in 1980 going back to Yorkton, sitting in a $150 a month apartment, watching a black and white portable of the Miracle on Ice, thinking, man, if I could ever have a moment like that in broadcasting, all this would be worthwhile, not believing that it would ever happen. And anyway, I'm introduced to Al Michaels, who I think is the best broadcaster, play-by-play man who's ever done it. And I did say to Al, I said, we won't have a moment like yours, but I hope we have a moment. Yes. And 24 hours later, we did. So
yeah, that's very special for sure. Yeah, it just gives me chills, because I remember that day. I remember where I was, and yeah, just a beautiful day for sure. And great call, as all of them are. So let's transition over to the here and now and the current NHL state. Full disclosure, most people that listen to this podcast know, but you're new to it. But I'm a diehard Leafs fan, Chris, and so I live here in Alberta, and I've had some tough years, but listen.
I didn't know that, and you got to walk on thin ice when you're dealing with Alberta guys, and you don't know if you should bring Toronto up. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's the one thing I've learned since going back to Hockey Night in Canada.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously, yeah, big Leaf fan, and obviously Brad Treliving, what he's done. And, years ago, I was going through some mental health stuff, and, he reached out, and, Travis Hammonick, who, and the story that he does to help out kids. And, I lost my father at a young age, and I was 33 when I reached out for some help, and Travis helped me, and Brad Treliving helped me. And, to that, I owe a huge allegiance to them. And, I look at Brad as, he's a busy general manager. Every day is a Monday for him. And, what he did for me in a little window, and how much I would appreciate a day that he gets to, hoist that Stanley Cup. And, obviously he's a great person too, but you've covered this team a lot. You've been around the game a lot. Is there something different about this Leafs team? Like James Myrtle just tweeted some great stats out, that they got the most amount of wins and the most amount of goals scored in the last 28 games. I think 20 wins, and they're doing good right now. They're humming along, and they're still fighting for home ice against Florida. Where are you at with the Leafs, and what this could look like for them in the playoffs?
Well, I just wanted to say I agree with you about Brad. He's a special guy, and you noticed, even in a very small way, in our broadcast, and I'm not suggesting he's bringing us into the team, but because the team is very separate from a local broadcast or a national broadcast. But Brad has tried to develop communication lines that I've been really impressed with. That right from the start of the season, he kind of reached out. What can we do to help you tell our stories better? It's something that doesn't often happen in the game, but he's a good man, and he's an easy guy to cheer for. I will say there's a lot of easy people to cheer for in this business, and we started with Mike Futa, and he's one of them too. But you can go right across the board with every team, and there's good people. I'm interested in how the Leafs have developed during the year, because what Brad Treliving did early in the year to kind of lay the foundation didn't have immediate results. And you can go back into pre-Christmas, and people are saying, well, Bertuzzi didn't work, and Max Domi really hasn't clicked here, and John Klingberg obviously didn't click. And there were a lot of moves that were made that didn't pay instant dividends. But here's where Brad Treliving, I think, excelled as much as anybody possibly could in his role. And that's when Ilya Samsonov needed help, and he needed a reset. And what Treliving did there was a stroke of genius, because he helped him step aside and put him in a position where he could regroup. And I think a lot of us believe that Ilya Samsonov was done with the Leafs. That he was not going to play either an important role or maybe any role at all. But Brad's a great people person, and he took Samsonov aside. He let him regroup. He didn't even play him in the American Hockey League. And I know Craig Simpson has mentioned that was important too, because you can send somebody down, and suddenly, if they don't have success down there, now they're really questioning themselves. But even going down there can be, maybe I'm just an AHL goaltender. And there's nothing wrong with that, except if you're a guy that wants to be a successful NHL guy leading his team to playoff success. So that was one example of how Brad Treliving has been, put his fingerprints on this team this year. And it may be the most important one. But beyond that, now all of a sudden we're late in the season. The late push is on. Tyler Bertuzzi is one of the hottest guys in the league. Yeah. Max Domi is excelling. And suddenly all the pieces are starting to fit. But with that said, there's 10 other teams I think you can honestly say have as good a chance. And we might be shortchanging that number. But and you think back to Mike Futa's 8th place LA Kings team going and winning the Stanley Cup. So, I can't honestly tell you that the Leafs are going to the Cup or getting out of the first round, because the task is huge in both ways. I mean, to play Florida in the first round, and things are changing so quickly. I mean, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I think people around Toronto were thinking anybody but Florida. And man, nobody wants Florida because Florida might be the best team in the East. And now, a couple weeks later, that's changed. And now maybe it's a better path for the Leafs. So I will suggest that there is no better path. You've just got to take whatever's given you.
Yeah.
And we still don't even know if it's going to start. And by the time people are watching this, it may change. But the Leafs actually have it in their hands to finish ahead of Florida because they're 3 back game in hand and 1 against Florida. So you win the game in hand and you beat Florida in regulation and you could be at home. So does that even matter?
Yeah.
Probably doesn't. It may be, I think back, most of the best Leaf moments that I can remember in the playoffs are on the road. So, including last year's Tavares goal in Tampa Bay. So, long story to say that they're in it, but man, there is a long list of teams that could win it as well.
Yeah. Well, obviously, in the rest of the Canadian picture is very intriguing too. What Vancouver's been able to do this year out here in Edmonton, and obviously a good friend in our podcast, and Mike Futa and Tyler Toffoli going to Winnipeg, and just a great story there. The rest of the Canadian picture, how do you see that unfolding in a way of, like, obviously great years that they've had, and it's tough to predict because we don't know. And you like you say, there's these 8 seeds get in. Florida last year get in, and Mike Futa's in the past, but the Canadian picture looks pretty decent and pretty great this year, doesn't it, Chris?
It does. It does, and yet again, I mean, you're starting off. I mean, you're going right into it. I mean, is Vancouver going to play Vegas, or is Edmonton going to play Vegas? And what's Vegas going to be like in a week or two? They've been beaten up quite a bit, but everybody kind of knows that by playoff time that might be much different. So, and Winnipeg's got to run that gauntlet in the Central, and it looks like they got to start with Colorado.
Yes.
But to be the best, you got to beat the best, and maybe it's better. We've debated this too. Is it better to have that tough first round, and if you can get through that, the momentum can carry you a long way. But Winnipeg having to go through Colorado and maybe Dallas is daunting, and so yeah, it's no matter where you look, there's somebody out there that I'm thinking of Walter Gretzky telling Wayne that no matter how good you think you are, there's always going to be somebody better or stronger or bigger. And fortunately, Wayne kept going and turned out to be better than anybody else. But yeah, it's going to be tough no matter where you look.
Yeah. Do you like the current playoff format, Chris, or would you like to see it go back to the way it was before, or are you just pretty happy? Like, you get the best of the best right now, but where are you at with the format?
Yeah, I'm a 1 to 8 guy.
Yeah.
I'd prefer that, and I usually did the what would be the matchup if that was the case and how different it would be. And sometimes it's not different at all, and sometimes it's quite a bit different. Here's my thought: if you want it to be a divisional thing, then maybe we should play 2 games, 1 home and away against all the other teams outside your division, and then play 5 or 6 against the teams in your division. I mean, the Leafs just played Montreal for the first time. Well, they played them twice in a few weeks, but they went 4 months without playing them. And I think that's similar across the board. That I mean, it's good that you're having these late season divisional matchups. I get it, but you almost forget about, the rivalry between the Leafs and Tampa, or Florida, or Edmonton and Calgary, because it's been months between those games. So I like the thought of maybe playing 5 or 6 games within your division, and then just the 2 home and home, if divisions are what you're thinking about.
Yeah.
Now, the argument there is, well, sometimes you get a weaker division, but that is cyclical. And by the time, you get around to 2 or 3 years from now, the strongest division might be the weakest division. So, there's always going to be
Yeah,
flaws.
yeah, and I think you have a case there because, like, look, you and Craig called, that Battle of Alberta just recently, and then the following year when we came back the next year for the full season, those teams only played each other 3 times, and
Yeah.
like that.
And I think one of the home games was, or the only home game in one of the buildings was like, well, it might have been October, November, and
Yeah,
it
yeah.
might be over, before it feels like the season started. So yeah.
Correct. Yeah. How special was that to call that Battle of Alberta, and obviously another historic call in Connor McDavid, winning the series in overtime. How great was that?
Yeah, it was amazing. I I did the 91 Flames Oilers series, which for a long time and maybe still is the best series I've ever done. That went to overtime in game 7. Um, and so being in Edmonton from 84 to 91, I know exactly what all that history is all about. And it was never better, I don't think, than then, but it gave you the same feel again that we were getting back to it. And um, unfortunately, Calgary's stepped back since then, because I think the makeup of those two teams in that series you're talking about, that could have been pretty interesting for a number of years.
Yes.
But that's not the case. It's a different time now. Obviously, in the Cap era, things are a lot different than they were in the 80s and early 90s.
Yeah. We'll finish up on this. Our podcast is credited through the Calgary Flames. We have a media pass there, and we'll finish up on you getting a quick rip on what you think the Flames have done. And I think Ryan Huska's done an amazing job for what they've gotten traded out of the organization and what they brought into the organization. I think Craig Conroy's done an amazing job in that aspect too. But where are you at with the Flames, the future? Obviously, maybe this is kind of that first real rebuild that they're doing, but they brought in some really good younger players. Great stories, and Oliver Shillington coming back, and I'm 100% on board with Kelly Rudy on Hockey Night Canada talking about maybe this Masterson Award could go to Oliver Shillington for recognizing mental health. This would be the first time someone's won that award, knowing that they've gone through some mental health struggles. But a great story, him coming back. But the future of the Flames, how excited are you to kind of see that, and what you thought of their season so far too?
Yeah, I think Craig Conroy's done a good job. I think was in a difficult spot, because I don't think everybody can tear it all down and start over. There's only there's only going to be one Connor Bedard every few years, and you can't have 10 teams tearing down trying to get the one guy. And I like what he's done, and to find a guy like Sharangovich is, to me, like a poster boy for why they've done a nice job this year, and found the right young potential pieces, and started to and Mackenzie Weegar's had a tremendous year on the blue line. So I thought there was a push there coming, that they had a shot at the playoffs. I don't think it's the end of the world, and I don't know if you should be too disappointed in that, because I think that his moves at the deadline and whatnot give you the sense that this can turn around quicker. It kind of like what the Canucks did, which is, I think there were a lot of people saying full teardown in Vancouver, and Jim Rutherford went and looked and said, we've got some pretty special core pieces here. Let's surround them with some different people, and of course you get a guy like Quinn Hughes who elevates his game to Norris Trophy status, and everything falls into place. So it'll be interesting. I'm interested to see, or even hear, what you think. The Markstrom noise before the trade deadline, is he a long-term piece, or is that going to be the next piece of the puzzle in getting more assets that are going to be long-term pieces for the Flames?
Yeah, and in that, I would say, obviously you got 3 goaltenders in that organization, and Dustin Wolf just got his first win on the road last night in his hometown in San Jose. But I do obviously, that we were there, the comments that Markstrom made to the media horde, not being happy of how it was kind of handled. And Craig has said that things are okay, and obviously that's to us out in the media side. But you would hope maybe they can find a way to resolve that. And he obviously is a great goaltender, but you're going to get a huge asset in return. And a lot of the conversation was New Jersey maybe shaping their organization to try to see if they can go get him. But I think Jake Allen's come in and done a good job for them there. He obviously played pretty good last night. Didn't get the win, but he was there to hold them in. But you would definitely think the return on him is going to be huge if you do trade him. But what you just said about Vancouver, you got to look at that situation, and you do got some great young pieces there. Maybe there's, a way you can get Huberdeau going a bit more and kind of get a little bit more out of him for the future. But Nazem Kadri's had a really great year. Michael Backlund is, just a tremendous person off the ice and a great player on the ice too. So, I would think maybe you want to keep him. But a 3-goaltender system, obviously, we know that doesn't really work in the NHL, and we'll see where that goes. But the asset you're going to get for him is going to be crazy big. So.
Yep. And we like Craig Conroy, and like the fact that he was homegrown in the organization, and a good guy who's has a difficult job, but I think he's off to a pretty good start.
Yeah, and having Jerome back in the organization too, in an advisory role helps out. They're just a great organization, and as you know, Peter Hanlon's probably one of the best in the game. For the communication side, and Sean Kelso, just great people there. But we appreciate the 45 minutes you've given us, Chris. It definitely means a lot. This is a highlight, getting to do this. I've learned that it is a hobby, but it's also take it very serious. And, like you, I dreamt about playing in the National Hockey League, and but the dreams maybe came to a different way of now being a part of it in this aspect. And this year I got that experience and getting a media pass, and the great people like Mike Futa, and all the greats, and Elliot Freeman, and Ron's been great. And so just so many great people that you work with and got to work with along the way. And all the continued success. So looking forward to it. I know the playoffs are a grind. It's a lot of work, but all the best to you and your family, and hopefully it's a great year, and we get to hoist see a Stanley Cup Canadian team win the Stanley Cup. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Joshua. Just you and I both, we weren't good enough to be in the NHL. I was called a stay-at-home defenseman. The coach would have preferred if I just stayed at home. But anyway, the playoffs are a grind, but they're the best time of the year. So enjoy, and I enjoyed being with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome back to the 2 Months Podcast, presented by Pete's Concrete. I am your host, Joshua Marshall, and we have a very special guest. I know I always say that, but he is a longtime executive in the National Hockey League, former coach in the OHL, and you can find him on various Sportsnet channels, and you can find him on the NHL satellite radio with Steve Koulias and all the great guests that they have there. And this guy is a 2-time Stanley Cup champion. He is Mike Futa. Futes, how's it going?
Good, Joshua. Great to see you, my friend, back behind the I guess you had Chris Cuthbert on recently, but it's great to see you back where you belong, behind your desk.
Yeah, you know what? It felt good. I did a good interview with Sonny Sakan last night, and he was recognized for the first Oilers South Asian Hockey Night. And I know that many other organizations have done that before, but it was the first one in Edmonton. And yeah, just finished up a good interview with Chris Cuthbert that will release on Thursday. This interview with you will release later today on Wednesday. So, and again, thanks to you and everything you do, man. I went for a tea, just a little emotional, because everything you do for us here at the pod is just tremendous. You are our biggest supporter, our biggest contributor, and adding that great guest list that we have, and all that is not possible without you. And I know it was a kind of a bittersweet weekend. It was great pictures that you posted of Amazing Grace Bowen, and would have been her 19th birthday, and just emotional in that. And you and I've talked about this off record too, and but continue to hold her legacy up. How special kind of was to emotional but special in a way of keeping her legacy going. Futes, how honored are you in that?
Well, that one caught me off guard, because now you got me
emotional.
It's one of you can't really put it into words, because Well, first off, my oldest daughter's turning 19 and my twins are 17. So at the same time, they were always in the same age bracket as Grace. And I still remember just seeing her in her little wheelchair with her foot on upside down. When she had her leg amputated, she had her foot reattached upside down with hopes of becoming a sledge hockey player, because that was her next dream because of her love for hockey. And it was all through Justin Williams in Coburg. And I mean, as I said, these NHL players that give their time and do this all the time, for me, kind of being like entrenched in the management and scouting side of things, I'd never really been exposed to that. I mean, I'd seen what they do as players, but I just fell in love with this little girl, and I think the feeling was reciprocated. And I took her out on a couple of dates, went to the World Junior, took her parents out to places, and I had this dream of her dropping the puck, and I'd mentioned before, as at Staples Center at the time, was before crypto, whatever it is now. And that night we made Justin Williams was the honorary captain. And it was funny because as fate would have it, we were playing Calgary and Mark Giordano was the captain for the other team. So when I see that picture of Grace dropping the puck, and she had the place at the end of her fingertips, and she went back and she succumbed to the disease. And I was asked to represent Justin, and I delivered the eulogy along with Haley Wickenheiser. So for whatever I can do, and it's not like everybody, because in today's world, there's a lot of different charities and they're all great charities, right? But I choose to kind of pour the majority of my time and energy with regards to whether it's jerseys or, like, I know she's having her first annual golf tournament this summer, which I've already committed to being at. So she's just special. And I can't help but anytime anything kind of depressing or where real life throws you a pitch or something that you kind of start to feel sorry or, oh, what was me? I think about her and how quickly she was taken away from us. Yeah. In that little picture, I stood, like, seeing her in that open casket with so much life left to give. And I had given her a little guardian angel necklace that she was wearing. She was a dream, and I've kept close with the family, and we do stuff every year together. But again, I think it brought Justin Williams and I closer together than can ever imagine. But yeah, I thank you for bringing it up. Anything I do from a charity standpoint, I think she's got her own ward now at the hospital for sick kids with all the different people that have helped out. But she's a special lady, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, she definitely is. And, great family. And you do an amazing job continuing her legacy and the smiles that she can bring to people's faces. And definitely missed. It's tough. And like you say, life throws you different things here and there, right? And putting things in perspective, so it's try to find share those good stories, but are also tough too. Like losing someone so special to you, it hurts a lot in a lot of ways. And we with Chris Cuthbert, we talked about, look at the story that Ben Stelter brought to the hockey world too, right? So and Amazing Grace did that too. And the connection Justin Williams had, who was on with us before too, that you helped us get. And and obviously Futs, CC loves you. So there's a lot of great people out there in the game too that continue to hold the Mike Futa flag of just great person and great individual. So
he's got that iconic voice, and it's like it's funny because I mean, if you close your eyes, you think of everything Canadian.
Yeah,
that you call it, whether it's the Olympics or whether it's CFL or NHL. And for me, it was like, because our 2012 Cup run, he
talked about this. Yeah.
He was undefeated, right? Like, yeah. It was almost like, and I was like, stupid me, it's like superstitious when you're not a player. Like, I mean, I was like doing different things on the treadmill that if I don't do this in the treadmill, we're not going to win tonight. It was like, oh yeah, okay. But anyways, that's just that superstitious side of you. And then every time I saw Chris Cuthbert, he was undefeated. And in fairness, we were on a pretty good run there. We went up 3-0 in every series. So maybe the leverage that I would, and the rose petals that I was throwing towards Chris, they kept, all I know is we never lost a game when he was calling it. So he was my good luck charm from the media standpoint.
He did touch on that story, actually. So people will be able to hear that on Thursday. So yeah, obviously, transition over to the NHL here. Our NHL report sponsored by Sheena Boychuk Real Estate, a great realtor here in the Edmonton area. So And Johnny Boychuk's that's his wife, and the career he's had, Johnny, and the Islanders are fighting. They're in the mix right now, and a tough hit last night that took a lot of these teams play each other again here before the season's out. So we'll see if we have another line brawl in a different way. We had one with the Islanders, or with the Devils and the Rangers. Let's see if this transpires with the New York Islanders. Who knows? But they're in the fight. There's a lot of great playoff races right now. Which is the most intriguing to you, that kind of stands out to you, as seeing like who gets in and who might not get in? Is it the Penguins? Because we kind of counted them out. They were like a 1.7% chance of making it not too long ago, and they're still in the fight. But where are you at with the playoff race?
We need to put it like a 4-hour package together. There's so many intriguing stories.
Yeah.
I wasn't too excited about there's a little bit more excitement now with the Eastern Conference, because for me, it was like a stationary bike race. It was like if I was excited, I'd be one of the teams that's going to get one of these teams in the first round, because you see some of these incredibly maniacal matchups that are going to happen in the Western Conference, and again in the top of the, in the Atlantic, and then you see certain of these teams that just can't seem to get out of their own way. Some of them that were sellers, I was down at the game against Pittsburgh the other night, and they're playing such a desperate brand of hockey, and to watch what Crosby's doing is absolutely asinine how incredible it is. But they seem to be a little thin, like the drop off after their stars. They just don't seem to have the depth, and it's a nice story with Nedeljkovic coming in and playing the way he has. But again, it's almost a little bit like the Edmonton story, which I hate bringing up because I love Jack Campbell, but the guy that you've invested all your money in isn't the guy carrying the mail right now at this time of year. And it's a tough thing. Like even Tristan Jarry just hasn't lived up to his contract status. And again, I just think it's hard to weigh all that when you don't have, like, I always go back to 2012 when we had to go on a heater. And we did it at a time, I think it would have been the last 10 or 12 games, but we went in playing our best hockey. We were just on such a roar, and we had Jonathan Quick as well, right? And we could play we were healthy, which is huge when you start to hear some of these names popping up that might be injured or in a Vegas situation, like you don't even know who's coming back and when they're coming back. The uncertainty that falls there with an Aiden Hill. We had all cylinders burning now. I look at the teams that are coming in now, and I just don't, there's still question marks in goal. The only team that seems to be having the same type of momentum is the Islanders, right? Because, and they've got Sorokin, who's capable of winning a game on his own as well. And they kind of can play a shutdown style, beach in the aisles, not too many superstars, but enough good guys that they might give you a headache in the playoffs if they find a way in. And then there's the Patrick Waugh factor. But you look on the other side, like some of these teams, it almost looks like they burn like we were talking about Nashville, and it's almost like after they got in and got secure, they got to take a deep breath at the incredible run they went on, and now it's like they're trying to find their game again. And like Vancouver, you got so used to playing incredible hockey, knowing you've got Demko stand on his head, and now you've got to play without him. So there's so many factors with some of these teams that and I know I'm all over the place, but you just don't even know what roster you're getting come playoff time to analyze. And so on, they could, I was like, wow, look at that. Edmonton's going to play LA. Then it's like, wow, look at that. Vegas is going to play LA. There's so many different unseen circumstances. I guess the one that you only know, it looks like the Leafs in Florida.
Yeah.
But they're all good scenarios. They're fun. I
Yeah.
mean, certain teams should feel a little bit more heat than others. But as I said, it's the best time of year when you're a hockey fan and when you're a hockey player, as long as you're on the right side of the cut line. And it should be a lot of excitement for everybody.
Yeah. So we're with Vegas, obviously a big game tonight here. We'll preview this game, Edmonton Oilers versus the Vegas Golden Knights. The last regular season game for Vegas on the road. Already reports that Stone's skating and he's done another test, and the playoffs are right around the corner, so maybe he's on the ice for game one of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Thomas Hertl just played the other night in Vancouver, played around 20 minutes, looked good, played power play, played penalty kill. That was a big ad for them. William Carrier's out, Petrangelo's out with illness, but they're going to get some of their bodies back. But if that's a matchup that the Oilers get and Vegas gets all their guys back, where are you at here with the Oilers versus the Golden Knights? Because this Evander Kane stuff is very intriguing to watch, and I know that some people are saying it's a part of the game and all that, but where there's smoke, seems like there's fire. And everything I'm hearing on him, I don't know where you're hearing on him, Feuds, but everything I'm hearing on him isn't that well pleasant. And he's blown my phone up, and not liking some of the things I have to say. But I'm going with factual evidence here, and I have the receipts to prove it. But is he could be really good for them in the playoffs, or he could really be bad too. So,
well, it would be a real shame if when you look at how hard they had to come back as a unit to make it a playoff after that horrendous start, that if kind of internal device was something of a downfall. Now, the one thing you talk about, what you can see, what you get with Evander Kane, is one thing is he's a unicorn, whether you like him or dislike him, what he brings to the table as a hockey player. Like, he's about when you talk about what's left of the gunslingers that can score, when you think of the Tom Wilsons, etc., there's not many of them. So a good version of Evander Kane, a happy version of Evander Kane, is somebody that can win a playoff game for you and physically help. He's got that body that doesn't break down, and he could be a huge part of any team's success. Now, what I'm seeing because of the past history of, questioning him as a teammate, and only his teammates would know that. I'm not a teammate, but from the outside, he has moved around, and there's always been this little trail of controversy that surrounds him. So what you see on the bench, these are, first of all, it was with Draisaitl, and then you and you could obviously from the outside, you can say, who knows, maybe they're just arguing about the pregame meal or the postgame meal. Well, that's a crock.
Yeah.
Okay. There's something going on, and whether it's from an outside, it looks like, listen, we're getting pushed around physically, and you're the guy on this team that's supposed to, that can handle that, step up to the plate. And there's always that element too that my old coach said, players only love you when you're playing. And when Evander Kane's playing in a top six role power play unit, you're kind of getting everything that you're hoping to get out of him. And when you start to slide him down, he gets miffed with his ice time and his role, because he does have a lot more to give. But if you're consistently not bringing it and you're held accountable, sometimes what you see is not the best version what you can get. So long story short, they've played together as a group. We've seen what they can do like as an A team. So if they were to draw on somebody, I think either way, they're going to have a really tough series. But whether it's the Los Angeles Kings, who seem to have a way of, there's a lot of question marks there too, but they can really, and the Oilers have had their number, but every game seems to be a little bit closer. They've shown the ability with that 1-3-1 to frustrate some of the speed of the Oilers. And then when you look at Vegas, I think at least the one thing we can say is that as much as we were, and I certainly was, here we go again with Vegas. God, McCrimmon's brilliant. Look at this. Now, clearly the captain's going to come skating out of the gate, and Hurdle's going to, be a huge addition and stuff like that. They are so banged up that I think they're going to have to rely on some of that incredible chemistry they have and the ability they know they won together. Like the other one that's quietly not around is Aiden Hill, right? And then you see Logan Thompson get carted off the ice in practice. He's back, but that defense healthy should be a real problem for anybody in a playoff series. But if you can allow Stone and Hurdle to kind of just get some chemistry, like it's just too big of a show. It's too big of a dance stage to just throw everybody out for the first time and hope there's chemistry when your opponent is the Edmonton Oilers or teams that have consistently shown they can do it all year. So there's lots of pressure everywhere. And you just to think and fathom that either the Edmonton Oilers or the Vegas Knights could be out in the first round just has a bad taste altogether.
Yeah. Or even Colorado or Winnipeg, if those two.
Very possible. Oh yeah, Colorado, Winnipeg. Like I've got my early pool, I had Colorado and Carolina Stanley Cup final, and they both, as much as I love both teams, they could both be gone in the first round. It looks like Carolina's probably going to get a softer touch, but there's no soft touch in the play. I mean, just a better matchup. I think soft touch is a tough one. There's teams that you really should not be lose two in a 7-game series based on your larger picture in the regular season, but anything can happen in the playoffs, and there's always an injury or a play or some luck along the way that changes everything drastically.
Yeah. What was your take on, when you were in the league there, looking at Matthias Ekholm and, watching him now, and, you've seen a lot of these great players in the National Hockey League. It almost seems like this Matthias Ekholm that the Oilers have now is like shades in a way of the Chris Pronger that was here when they went to the Cup final. Like what he's done on this back end and solidifying everyone in the right roles. Can you talk about, the intangibles that
Well,
that guy
I mean,
brings?
it's a tip of the hat to the group. I mean, the pro scouts and the staff in Edmonton to identify somebody like that, to come in and be able to play that kind of throwback warrior style. Now, Chris Pronger, that's a little bit of a Chris Pronger would have he's in a different echelon of, they don't make Chris Prongers anymore, and he'd be suspended 20 games a friggin' night just per shift the way he played the game, which is why we all loved Chris Pronger. So no, but this is again in today's National Hockey League, Ekholm is an invaluable piece. I still think if they could roll it back at Edmonton, completely, when you see what they have, I think they would, just like Toronto. I think everybody should have taken a little bit, and maybe they did. This is the other thing. I just felt at the time that Tanev was such a huge need for a couple teams, and Dallas being one of them too, that I would have found a way to find my way to get my hooks into somebody like that. And I know there were some people in the hockey world down on him at his game with Calgary closer to the deadline, said, "Do you really want to pay this much for Chris Tanev?" And yeah, you do. And I just think it's Edmonton. There's just a name, and I'm sure they were in on it. So it's not like this is something new to them. But I think they've left themselves an injury, or maybe just depth wise, still a little short on the back end for the kind of run that's necessary to win a playoff.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing when you look at the Vegas Golden Knights, like scratching Zach Whitehorse.
Yeah.
And the healthy one, that's depth. That's depth. And that's competition now, because you've got guys like Haig and him battling. You can't take any off nights, and it's incredible how they match up lefty righty as well. With, I guess, them and probably Carolina are the best depth, kind of Baskin Robbins, and then they're all a little bit different, all a little different flavor, all taste really good, but they play together. They match up really well, those two defense cores.
Well, that pairing of Nick Hague and Zach Whitecloud were unbelievable in their cup run, right? Like
won a cup. They won a cup, and right now one of them is out of the lineup every night.
Yeah. And it's like that is almost like a top 4 defense, not and that to them was their bottom pairing defense, and some other teams that could be your third and fourth.
That's why I talked, Josh, like going the other night, as much as it was amazing to watch what the Penguins are doing and stuff, like after the Letang Carlson kind of guys leave the back end, you kind of got to Google some guys.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're good NHL players, but when you're trying to go on the kind of run they have with kind of not quite sure goaltending, it makes a real daunted task. And that's why even our beloved Leafs here, I love what they're doing, and they're playing great, and they're doing with injury, and everybody's getting in. They're playing tougher. Looks like Samponot's found a game, but they still internally, they're not sure who their 6 are to start the playoffs.
They're not, yeah.
Either be injury, whether it's Edmonton, obviously they're just resting him as an older guy, but it also tells you an older guys, they're more, when they start to play that physical style, it catches up to their body in a hurry a lot quicker, right? So it'll be interesting. And now Giordano come back, and he looks like he's got something to prove, and it'll be really interesting to see what the Yahtzee Cup rolls out from Sheldon Keefe on the back end there.
Yeah. Well, you can't count Giordano out, right? Like obviously it went through a tough a tough passing in his father, and then came back, had a game, and then the next game had a concussion. And since he's been back in the lineup, he's been a difference maker for them, and he's the oldest player in the National Hockey League right now.
You know what I think of him, but I struggle with any to start the series against the Florida Panthers, which is going to be a gunfight. Any version of the 6 that doesn't have Mark Giordano in it to start is the wrong version.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. So that'll be tough. And obviously Timothy Liljegren, who's been out, talk of him coming back. But he hasn't had the greatest playoff success before, so I don't know where that pairing goes. Like, is he with Edmondson, who kind of plays the physical touch, and Liljegren?
These guys are so talented, Joshua. If I was a Leaf defenseman, I would spend every ounce of my off time learning how to shoot right.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, change that stick over, right? So, and how crazy was that? The guy that Kyle Dubas brought in the other night in Jake McCabe is the guy that cost the Penguins that extra point in the overtime where he got the goal. So that trade's obviously worked out for the Toronto Maple Leafs, right?
There's the old squirrel nut theory.
Yeah. So some good.
How about the guy that he brought in that's leading the Nashville Predators to the, along with Luke Shen?
Yeah.
How about the guy that he let go that scored? Yeah, they had 50 pucks in Edmonton. So
yeah, there is, and he has a longer list.
That Jake McCabe trade. I'm sure that's not the first one the Leafs are going to bring up when they think about what got away and the assets that are gone. But anyways, I love Jake McCabe. So you're right. That's kind of the dirty and mucky kind of player they need, and that kind of game is going to transfer to the playoffs as well.
Yeah. You go to these games. You're in Toronto. We're like, as a Leaf fan too, like, obviously it was funny. Maybe you prepped Chris Cuthbert telling him that I was a Leaf fan because I said it, and he's like, actually, I heard you are. So I don't know if you told him.
I didn't say anything. All you have to do is listen to a podcast.
Yeah, so maybe he already listened to some, but yeah, it was just intriguing to see what the year they have. Obviously, Matthews with 66 goals, he's got inching closer to 70. Nylander is not going. He has not kind of been the same player since his contract's been signed. So there's been a drop off in his totals, but he's still on the pace to getting the 100 points. And, it's still a huge accomplishment. Marner coming back, I think, it's crazy because at the start, even we talked about it, Chris Cuthbert is just, with Domi and Pertuzzi, and now they're working out. I know you speak very highly of Brad Treliving, but some of these moves that were questions at the start aren't questions anymore. And then maybe the story of the year is Ilya Samsonov, and he'll probably be the game one starter. But the Leafs, he
will be. He will be.
Yeah,
you're right about. That's another one that's a pat in the back to them. Unfortunately, they got rid of some good goaltenders, but he's been outstanding. He kind of, after the whole Jack Campbell thing, and then he came in and to fall off as crazily as he did. It's almost, I talked to Peter DeBoer and Steve Spott too, because like Ottinger arguably was one of the best players in the playoffs last year, and he lost himself too this year. Like, it was crazy to watch, and now he's got it back. But very similar take to Samsonov and not just get it back, but to like he was elite the other night against Pittsburgh, like elite. So it'll be interesting if you don't have to worry about that position. Like, we were so spoiled, right? You just close your eyes and Jonathan Quick appears, right? So yeah, we were spoiled, but we also, we had Martin Jones standing on his head, and we had Jonathan Bernier. We had solid 1Bs who had either been 1As or on the way to be 1As. So it's such an important position, and I think there's got to be a little bit of doubt creeping in a little bit with. I know he's been out a long time, but the Samsonov has definitely put himself ahead of Wall. Like they were such a big, well, when Wall comes back, it's his net. Well, Samsonov's not giving the net up. So it's been something to watch. But again, you just see these teams that have this, and maybe it's because it's Toronto, but you can say again, and we can sit here, Josh, and say nothing that happens in the regular season matters. And we say this every year with the same team, but then something comes along that really makes it matter. Like, you know what Austin, it's not even fair to the hockey traditionists to say that what Austin Matthews isn't doing doesn't matter. It's absolutely magical to see this guy making 65 look easy. Like, so that's magical. So that does matter. Now, I wouldn't want to injure him trying to pursue it, because everybody that is going absolutely crazy chanting MVP at whatever they call it, Scotia Place, if they roll into Florida and come back down 0-2, or the same ghosts are haunting, those people will WWE turnstile, heel turn, and that place will turn into a zoo of booze. And there's just such an expectation that this team will be judged based on its playoff performance, bar none. But again, they've made the regular.
Yeah. Yeah.
They've made it special what he's done. It's been mad, but again, rightfully so. This team needs to have success. What I will say is, if they can be healthy, Brad Treliving, who would not give two fiddlers about what people thought early in a trade, because it takes a long time to get yourself back in the saddle and the chemistry side. That those guys right now, Bertuzzi looks like he's ready to play playoff hockey. Max Domi looks really comfortable. Mitch Marner doesn't look as comfortable, but he's been out a long time, and he always seems to get thrust in the, we can win without Mitch Marner kind of thing, which I think they cannot. Yeah. But I'd be shocked if somewhere in the playoffs early he's not back on the wing with Austin Matthews.
So let's move over to the Washington Capitals. Ovi gets 30 goals, 18 years, getting at least 30 goals. First player in NHL history to do that. But minus 40 goal differential. Now, Spencer Carberry and Mitch Love are friends of our podcast, so we're going to be supporting them and cheering them. They're in a playoff spot right now. Charlie Lindgren is doing an amazing job. Speaking of a goaltender that's getting a lot of money, and Darcy Kemper, who's just sitting on the bench, talking about earlier with Tristan Jarry and obviously Jack Campbell and whatnot. But what do you make of what the Caps been doing, and should Spencer Carberry get Coach of the Year if the Caps get in?
I no, he shouldn't. Honestly, I think he's done a wonderful job. Okay, but I mean, that team right now is like, the nights they grind out wins, it's unbelievable how they're winning games. So yes, he should be given huge applause for the job they're doing, the fact they're in it. And then Ovi, just when you're that kind of scorer, you can't be caged for that long before doing the job he's done. But when I look at that roster, like when they lose, still, even in the midst of this, when they lose, they don't screw around. They take a rage slap in the chin. They go out down by like 5 or 6 Cobb. It's not like they're and then they go in, but they're beating teams that they need to beat, which other teams just seem at this time of year, like that's the one thing the Leafs in the past haven't done down the stretch, is like when they get on a run and they go into a place like New Jersey that's banged up, and Hughes is out and this is out, and they go in and they still get their points. And they don't fall lower than the talent level that they're playing. It'll be really interesting down the stretch here with Washington. Their schedule, I mean, I think I saw they've got a couple games against teams they're up against. I think we're done with the Crosby. Ovechkin for the year head to head.
Yeah,
it's a great story, but again, it's not one I look at the teams. I look more because it's great that Washington kind of is a veteran team. You kind of think they were going to be in it anyways. I look more at like Philly, Detroit, teams that were, really kind of had us hoodwinked all year that they'd made that next step towards, across the ladder, and to see like Philly right now. And I know you said you want to talk about, like, I'm a huge Torts fan, but I mean, I think there's a lot of self-inflicted wounds in how Philly's got to where they've got to what they've become. And like to go into a place like Montreal when it's a must win and 9-3, like 9-3.
Is it safe to say the season was lost when Sean Couturier was a healthy scratch after 34 days?
It didn't help. It didn't help. And we'll only know, again, because you don't know. And he's done such a magical job with this group, getting them playing. And you can tell guys, like when he starts talking about, that's why I laugh when they were like the Leafs once again, like, we got to get Konechny at the deadline. But when Torts talks about Konechny, TK or whatever he calls him, you can see the glow in his eyes that he loves this guy. And that's the type of player he wants to build a team around. Now, what it just doesn't make any sense to me is, why would you name this guy captain if you had any doubts about what you were getting? So there had to be, and I don't know whether it was okay, and it's all speculation. It just doesn't make any sense that you make a veteran guy say, this is the kind of guy that, we want to, like his public comments on him, where this is going to be our guy, and then to publicly basically, just pilfer him with the healthy scratches and have it all almost like this is his fault. It was brutal. And then his referral, the one thing you can't get over the fact is, whatever, Carter hurt, self-inflicted wound, but like the goaltending's been just terrible, right?
Ersson is just he's tired, right? So
Well, they're exhausted, and it's not from again, as Torts would say, they're trying. But at this type of year, when you have a young team, you need somebody that you can just look back, and the nights that we're exhausted, he's going to make that save. And now, they bring in the big Russian, and then he was all over flopping all over that his last loss. Like, just NHL goalies aren't supposed to bite on a stick handle move that much, where you almost feel like you're sliding right out of the net. And whether he's going to be good or not, I hope they get to him and he turns out. But I mean, this type of game with this type of pressure, it takes a special type of player to come in and keep your team afloat. There's still games left, but I mean, that's one. Even last night, I was like, I got to watch Torts. I got to stay up and watch what Torts says after this one. And even it was like, he couldn't do it again. He couldn't say that we embarrassed the Flyer jersey and, all the stuff that he's been saying constantly. That's embarrassment. And these guys, is not whether they can't, some of them just will never be able to do it. And those kind of comments that have to just eat and wear at you. He just basically came out and said, we were good early, and then it snowballed and the wheels fell off. And then he didn't rip on anybody. Other than a little bit himself, but he had to be just shaking his head going, where did this thing go? How did we go from this team that has consistently all year put themselves in a playoff position? He didn't want to acknowledge it, but they kept doing it. Every time you thought they'd fall off, they'd win a few and put themselves right back in that spot. And now you're looking at, they're looking up at Pittsburgh, Washington, Detroit, who's another team that you just never know on a nightly basis what you're going to get.
Yeah.
But it'll be an interesting off season, because there's certain things that you can't just solve, right? No. This captain isn't a UFA, right? He's got term and a lot of money, and it's just not a comfortable feeling watching what's going down there. But kudos on the season they've had, but this is one you almost wish that you were you had a great pick coming up and you're feeling great about the draft. There's just nothing but a sour taste when you think about what's going on in Philly right now, because of how much they've accomplished. And now looks like they're going to be on the wrong side of the cut line, not have that high pick. There's just so many things that are going to make you, as a manager, coach, player, lose sleep when it comes to an end. It's unfortunate.
Yeah. And you hope, like, they're a good market. They drive a lot of money in the NHL, the Philadelphia Flyers, and we'll see what the Caps can do too. But we had all these teams out, so at least we're getting some races here. We'll see if Detroit gets in. Obviously, Steve.
I'd love to see the Red Wings. It's just that same. You talk about it, like there's something iconic about if it's a team that's not. Pittsburgh's been there, done that. Everybody's pulling for Sidney Crosby, but like Detroit and Philly, those are like iconic teams that it's almost like you miss them. Yeah. You didn't miss them when the Red Wings were winning every year, but it's almost like, come on, we need these guys back in. This is hockey town. And again, it's unfortunate. I mean, you hold on to Patrick Kane, you clearly feel that you got a shot at this thing.
Yep.
Right. And it just hasn't kind of worked out the way they'd hoped. So hopefully, what I'd just like to see in the next 4 games out of these teams, that somebody run into those 2 spots. Please don't just all 4 of you moonwalk
in. Yeah.
And who's the last team?
Fight in. Get, win them outright.
And let the math fall where it is, but not just have a bunch of teams finish 1 and 3, and then you got to calculate who has the best regulation wins or something like.
Yeah, we don't want to see that at all. Matt Rempe, you got to meet him in Toronto. You're smiling as soon as I say the name. Can you talk about your interaction with him and what you think of what he's done so far in his early parts of his NHL career, and what that whole fiasco was too? Because Curtis McDermott is a guy very well too. So, and how
it's become. I love that aspect of the game. I love the talk of. I love the fact that they're taking headshots out of the game and the hits from behind, but the fighting part of it, especially because all these guys would, at least for the most part, like Ryan Reeves is playing good hockey now. These guys have to be able to play, right? And it was funny because I was down with Jonathan Quick, I was standing outside the dressing room with Kenny Reed, and I wanted to meet him. Obviously, and he came out, and it was like Laviolette was walking him out, and I just asked Quick. He called him over. And he's just massive. for one thing. Like that guy, Curtis McDermott, is a big man. Like Curtis, when he takes a shirt, looks like a pro wrestler. I used to watch Curtis McDermott rollerblading down the Manhattan Beach Strand, and it looked like an old, like if anybody walked out with a dog or anything, it would look like a scene from The Naked Gun. There would be just people flying everywhere because he had his headset on, and it was like this machine coming down the Strand. So when you picture this guy, the best scenario, I felt like Paulie, a skinnier version of Paulie, Paul Heyman.
Oh, Paul Heyman.
Paul Heyman walking as guy out to the room. You're staring this guy right in the sternum.
Yeah.
Like he's just massive. And plus he's got that showered hair down over, and he's got two massive shiners. So he does look like the Undertaker, but he was friendly. He's just, yes, sir, no, sir. I'm great to meet you, sir. And then, he put his hand around you, and you can feel your whole body kind of drop when he comes down. So it's amazing what he's doing. And I mean, I think he felt a little embarrassed. I think he felt a little embarrassed by the non-reaction that he had in Jersey, whether with Jersey after the hits, and then especially the waving at McDermott. I think he took it to heart, and he put himself right back up there. Like Curtis was not afraid to say, no, that's the kind of that you have the respect for. Now, it'll be, as you said, at some point, I personally think the guys that said that Jersey Ranger game didn't matter, it really mattered. Right. It brought the Rangers together. I mean, I didn't think all of them were going. Those guys they were all battling for each other.
Yeah.
Right. Now you look at, I don't know what you can do now. You mentioned the
island,
the pellets hit. I mean, it's getting late in the season that the last thing you need to find out is Jacob Trouba broke a knuckle, as the fourth fight at the same stoppage of play, trying to get momentum on a pellet hit on Zabinajad. You got to be smart about this, but I do think it's good for the game, and I think it's good for these teams. You can't tell me when you watch the Toronto bench when Reeves has been going lately, they're in heaven. Yeah. I mean, it's like, wow, this guy, he's got our back, right? He's got our back, and they haven't had that element in a long time. Now it'll be interesting again. I guess like neither of them played last night. I guess Toronto. I always look at the dates now just to see. So Toronto's got Jersey again. Whether McDermott and Reeves play that game, who knows?
Well, there could be something there because obviously McDermott, I wouldn't say he took a run at Matthew Nyes, but that was
Curtis isn't taking runs at guys and trying to finish checks. There's not a hell else going on out there especially when they have them up front. But I know it'll just be interesting because right now it's so critical to stay healthy for these teams that are in. So you got to be careful about that aspect of it, but you also don't want to give anybody any chips. Like you've got Toronto going into Florida. And I know when Florida came in a week ago or whatever, Paul Maurice went out of his way to say, nobody's going to remember what happened tonight 2 weeks from now, that's why I guess you get 865 wins, because that's crap. Yeah. That's like saying, okay, when Toronto goes into Florida with 3 games or 2 games late in the regular season, and that it's not going to matter to them what happens in that game, knowing that's your first round opponent. Every ounce of momentum that you can gain is a critical inch, yard, whatever. So that's going to go into that. That's going to go into a game like that. Yeah. So it'll be exciting seeing those matchups down the stretch. And again, it just comes back to, I forgot I bring up the Oilers and whoever their opponent is. I come up to, I don't include Vancouver because it's been magical, but they've been magical. That's why for me, when you bring up your Spencer and stuff like that, I go, Rick Tocchet just took this team from, like, they're not even a playoff team to potential, winning the banner for best in the league. So that to me separates yourself from a coach of the year standpoint. But I also wouldn't be surprised if they struggled in the playoffs because they just haven't been there yet.
Yeah.
Because they haven't been there yet. Whereas, I mean, you look at whoever the Leafs get, there's going to be a team that's expecting to win the Stanley Cup that's out in the first round. That's where I look at it and go, wow. And that's going to be the same case whoever Edmonton gets, because Los Angeles claimed themselves that, Vegas is this defending champ, and LA claimed they are right from the beginning. Luke Robitaille said, this is a team we're one of few teams ready to compete for the Stanley Cup, and they're a great team. So they should be in that mix. And then you brought it up, what Winnipeg's done. And again, there would be another coach of the year candidate in my case because of what Bonus and even when he's been away, the way the teams produced, those guys have kind of separated them from teams that it would have been hard to say quietly they were probably saying, we really got to make the playoffs. And now they're like, wow, we're Stanley Cup contenders, right? So Colorado and Winnipeg in the first round, one of those teams going home after the year they've had, man, there's going to be some nail biting over the next little bit.
There will be for sure. It's just I like it. I like the races. We got something here to look forward to in these last 2 weeks, and it's going to be a lot of fun.
Getting old, Joshua. The only thing's killing me is these friggin' and maybe it's this healthy lifestyle I'm trying to encourage. These late night games are absolutely killing me. I used to love knowing when I fell asleep in the West Coast in Los Angeles, there was nothing left that was going to intrigue me to put my television on to watch.
Yeah.
And now it's like, 10:30. Suck it up. Gotta watch the boys.
A 3-hour difference.
The morning comes and you're like, oh.
Yeah. No, I hear you, because obviously, I work in BC, live in Alberta, so obviously my main income is as a journeyman carpenter. So when I'm at work for 2 weeks, I'm watching these games, and I'm like, I'm ready. I got to go to bed because I got to get up at 4 a.m. So.
Well, I'll find out for sure, because there's games I want to watch on Thursday night, and I told you, Paul Bissonnette's got me coming into
Minnesota, right? So
this has got me coming into Minnesota with to meet the Spit and Chicklets crew. So I get a weekend with Biz, Colby Armstrong, Merles, and I guess I get to meet Witt. So
yeah,
everything seems to start a little early in their world.
Yeah. I got a funny story about Witt, but I don't know if it's a podcast story. It's
and save it.
Yeah,
I don't want to get in trouble before I actually meet.
No, exactly.
These guys, there's so
actually
much
nothing
fun.
bad. It's nothing bad about him.
There's so much fun to watch and be. I mean, obviously, I've got a special relationship with Biss. I've become much closer with Colby, but I mean, you see their stuff and they're following, and it's like, so I'm thinking, I'm used to going on a road trip and thinking, okay, I got to pack a suit, and now I'm like, I don't know what the heck. I think the only thing I'm probably gonna have to pack is 5-hour energy drinks, which my daughters have sworn me off of, and just thinking, like, the flight leaves at like 5:30, which I'm like, okay, that's a problem. Like in the morning, like who wakes up? Even Bissonnette, like that's before the rooster is still napping. So that's gonna be crazy. And then I gotta go. He's got like a bottle signing, a Pink Whitney bottle signing Friday afternoon, and then it's a meet and greet with the Chicklets group. So I don't even know if I'm talking to anybody about hockey.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting. All I know is my flight home Sundays again. Like I'm sure there was not a flight at 11 o'clock in the morning. I think I leave at 7 o'clock. So
yeah.
Anyways.
That'll be a lot of fun anyways. We'll be catching that on social media fronts for sure. So see you there. Let's finish up on this. Obviously some big news. We'll leave it for the end as we do, but Frank Seravalli reported earlier today from Daily Faceoff that the NHL is drafting up a schedule for the Arizona Coyotes to either play in Arizona next year or a chance of that team moving over to Salt Lake City, Utah, home of Trevor Lewis, friend of the pod and a great friend of you. Actually Trevor Lewis is 1 goal away from 100 in his national hockey career. I think he's sitting on 99 career NHL goals.
Somebody will hit him in the shin pad before this season's out.
Yeah, he's got all the rest of the games at home, so I'll see if he gets it at crypto.com arena, but it'll be pretty sweet to watch that. But the potential of, obviously, the end may near the end of this road for Arizona might be coming. I know Elliott's talked about there's a chance that maybe they come back sometime later on. They don't want to give up on that market. Obviously, it's an arena issue. We'll see what Javier Guladiaris kind of sees and what he wins in. But where are you at with the Coyotes? It's tough. Obviously, this is a tough kind of conversation to even have, because there's livelihoods at stake here with people that are, that work for that organization too, and then players that have actually signed contracts to play in Arizona. Would that carry over? It would carry over to the new city, but would they want to play there too? But your thoughts on this whole entire situation?
First of all, it's the National Hockey League, so yes, they'd want to play there. Arizona, for me, has always been like, I loved it. Like, right? I mean, coming in because of the weather, because it was cool, because when they played at the old arena, you'd have other than it was like a 45-minute bus ride from your charter to the rink itself. Once you were there, I mean, the hotel was right there, the weather was great, you had your little, so I think there is a market for, and just Shane Doan would say, when we played them in in the semifinals, that place was hopping,
Mhm.
right? So there's that potential, but I think it's run its course. I mean, I've met the ownership group vis-a-vis through the interview process, and I mean, I know they're passionate about it, but the reality of it is, enough's enough. This is the National Hockey League. I mean, you're going in to watch. I'm going in to watch the Kitchener Rangers and the London Knights play in buildings that have more seats
More fans
um,
and stuff. Yeah.
than fans. So to try and charge NHL dollars to watch it in a rink that you could save for fun. That's why they play NHL exhibition games in seats like in places like that, to give people that close up experience. And usually teams don't send their entire regular season roster because those players don't want to play in a 5,000 seat rink
Yeah.
in an exhibition game. And it's one of those events that you look at and tip your cap to have to play your entire season. And for me, from the outside looking in, I've heard it's an amazing atmosphere, but it doesn't even look sold out. It looks like they've got some pretty cagey looking camera angles just to make it look like there's 5,000 people there.
Correct. Yeah.
So all you end up getting is you get teams like the Leafs that have 4,000 people that will travel, and it turns into what I thought Vegas was kind of going to be like, and that's totally not been, where people plan their vacations around going to watch their favorite team play. So you kind of lose the home crowd advantage. Long story short, the National Hockey League is what it is because of what it is, and it's untouchable with regards to being the best product, the best classiest, the best structures, and it matters to have a facility that isn't up to par. It matters for the road team, and it matters for the home team. So whether it's Utah, whatever, to go to a place that's going to be magical, it's going to be packed, and then take time to sort it out. I mean, we came back to Winnipeg. It's not. I mean, we're talking about, Atlanta having another crack at it, or Minnesota. You came back to Minnesota, so why can't you get your ducks in a row and get a proper building, and then look at bringing a team back down the road, because it is a beautiful place to play and live. But this is enough's enough. You can't go through another year playing in front of 5,000 people, or not in that kind of facility, in my opinion, especially when there is an incredible option available with all the bells and whistles that you need to have a successful organization. And I'm sure players would be absolutely wide open to that.
Yeah.
Again, even if you're a free agent, I'd have to struggle thinking that a free agent isn't outweighing the weather and the lifestyle in Arizona as opposed to going there to win, right? Because it's such a beautiful climate and stuff like that, and it is a fun place to live and raise a family. I do think you mentioned people losing their jobs. I think that Bill Armstrong has done a good enough job that I would hope that he gets an opportunity, if it does move, to continue on the momentum that, I mean, they've got like 1,000 picks in the next few rounds. I mean, I think that I would hope it's not just, hey, the new owner's and that's part of the business. Sometimes the new owner has a new hockey operations staff that he's, but I would think in this case that Bill has done enough to deserve if it moves. And I think he signed a very long contract too. So to give him a chance in a new surrounding, to continue working on the positive steps that he's already made with the organization.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on it, and I think Elliot said this morning on the Jeff Merrick show that we might have a resolution to this before we really even thought it was. So it's not really shocking, because obviously,
well, if Elliot's saying that, you know what that means.
Yeah. So something's probably happening. Not new, because when we knew Atlanta was moving to Winnipeg, there's 2 schedules drafted up for those.
The only thing that is a little bit new, and I've heard this and probably way too much time in my hand, it's amazing how much pride the league, between Gary Bettman and Bill Daly, they keep this stuff internal, right? Like, you just never know. Like, they know, but it's such a huge thing. You never know who's interviewing. Like the Ottawa thing, there's so much secrecy about who the next guy is going to be. And for this to be almost a little bit cart ahead of the horse, like talking about renaming the team and stuff. And this guy seems to be a little bit, I remember when Balsami or whatever his name, that sounds like a vinaigrette dressing, but the guy that
Balsami, yeah.
The guy that was doing it, and
Blackberry, yeah.
he intended on moving the team to Hamilton without telling the league, and he got squashed like a grape before he could even get out of the gate because
Yeah.
the league doesn't do anything. It's like even when Ottawa, the new owner who's been awesome, he kind of got a little bit of his nose out of joint about when they lost that pick right out of the gate about not knowing about that.
Yeah.
When they were going through the
The
sale.
off trade. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's little things. So I'm sure internally, even if it's been decided, Gary's a little bit.
Well, something's intriguing because Ryan Smith tweeted out yesterday, which it's not Ryan Smith, the hockey player, it's Ryan Smith, the owner that wants to bring the team to Salt Lake City, Utah. Just tweeted out what kind of names would be good if a team came here, right? So
but I mean, that kind of thing,
kind of what you're tying into.
Kind of thing, I could see Gary Bettman with like a taser sitting at home saying every time he says something like that, he gets an electric jolt.
Yeah. Would you think he gets the approval by Gary to tweet that or no? Because he would have gotten the approval to speak to Jeff and Elliot on their podcast,
I just think if he has been, it's be a lot more generic than specific as he has.
Yeah.
Wanting to, but it is what it. I mean, I think at some point timing is of an essence. So they gotta have something in place here, but it certainly seems that he knows something that
not everyone might know, too.
That everybody might know.
Yeah, or might know. Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, we'll finish up on that. Appreciate your time here, Feuds, and always checking in on me and checking in on the others. And really appreciate everything you continue to do for us here at the podcast and the relationships and the great community that supports hockey is awesome. And all the best. Have fun in Minnesota.
Oh yeah.
Yes, obviously, say hi. It'll be fun.
Yeah, hopefully you're not talking about me with a black armband on.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see what happens. You and RA might not be a good mix. We'll see. But no, you did good. It was nice to see you on game notes there with Merles and Army and obviously everyone knows how much Paul Bissonnette loves you and great people there. So at that podcast. So continued success and looking forward to it. We'll keep an eye on the social media channels and see if how viral maybe you go or don't go. We'll see. All right. Take care, Feuds.
Appreciate it, bud.
Welcome back to the 2 Months Podcast presented by Pete's Concrete. I'm your host, Joshua Marshall. And we have a very special guest. I'm not gonna ramble on any longer or keep you guys just to myself. Let's get to our interview with Chris Cuthbert. So this is the lead analyst. He is the lead. Excuse me. Sorry. All right. I'll redo that. Welcome back to the 2 Months Podcast. I'm your host, Joshua Marshall. And our next guest is from Hockey Night in Canada, and he is the lead color commentator. Welcome back to the 2 Months Podcast presented by Pete's Concrete. I'm your host, Joshua Marshall, and our next guest is from Hockey Night in Canada. He's covered the Olympics. He's covered great games on the CFL too, on CBC and TSN, but he is now full-time with Hockey Night in Canada. He is the host of the Leafs games. He does all the great broadcasts there for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Welcome back to the 2 Months Podcast. I'm your host, Joshua Marshall, and we are presented by Pete's Concrete. Our next guest is waiting in the wing. This is his first time on the 2 Months Podcast, so we won't wait any longer. Let's get to our interview with Chris Cuthbert from Rogers Sportsnet and Hockey Night in Canada. Mutts fans, our next guest was the voice of CFL on TSN and CBC for many, many years, and he has been involved in the National Hockey League for 40 plus years. He's covered the Olympics. He has been recognized as the best broadcaster several times. He's won several awards for his great play-by-play calls. We'd like to welcome Chris Cuthbert from Hockey Night in Canada and Rogers Sportsnet to the 2 Months Podcast. Chris, how's it going?